JP Morgan said 84% of retirees with IRAs make this mistake, and I'm here to not let it be you. Hey everyone, I'm Andrew. I'm the owner of Lever Wealth Management, which is the financial advisor for people who scare financial advisors. And what I do is I take the learnings from those thousands of iterations of helping ultra high net worth and high net worth investors over the last several years, and I give them to you so that you can apply them to your own situation. And today I want to talk about this study that JP Morgan had done over a period of several years where they analyzed retirement account balances, IRAs specifically, and what they found is that 84% of people with IRAs who were subject to the required minimum distribution only took the required minimum, which is staggering. Now, some of this I will say is probably causation and correlation, meaning if I have a $5 million IRA account balance, of course I'm only going to take the required minimum distribution, right? And so those are probably the people who would have benefited in the past from doing things like Roth conversions, and probably could benefit even in the present by doing things like qualified charitable distributions to take care of part of the RMD, or even things like QLACs, which is an annuity that you can use to defer your retirement distributions until age 85 if you so choose. Even if that is a portion of the 84%, the fact that 84% of people only take the required minimum is not great, because it most likely means that people are underspending. Now, I think it's important for us to take a step back and talk about what the required minimum distribution is, when it's required, and how it's calculated. So they've pushed it back, and most of you watching this who are in your 50s are not going to be subject to required minimums until you're 75. It used to be 70 and a half, and then they changed it to 72, and now they've put up this staggered schedule until 75. But if we assume for sake of discussion that it's 73, which it is right now, you turn 73, you have $1 million in your IRA. They look at the previous year's December 31st value. Okay, so you turn 73 in 2025, they look at 12/31 of 24, they review the actuarial table, and at the beginning of retirement, it's actually roughly 4%. However, what happens is, since it's looking at an account value and an actuarial rate each year, you're not spending a constant amount. And it's a great way to make sure you keep money, and it's a terrible way to make sure you spend money. It's like the guardrails approach to retirement spending on steroids. Because if next year, let's say I was all equities, and next year the account value after I took out my $40,000 and I lost money, it's $750,000. Well, now it's going to be 4% plus a little bit for an actuarial adjustment of the 750, not of $1 million. And so what happens is the spending, it might be 40,000 one year, and then your RMD the next year may be 20 or 25, and then it goes back up, right? So even though the factor from the actuarial tables increases, it's a percentage of possibly a lower dollar amount. So people tend to have residual amounts left in their IRAs. That's all well and good if you're wanting to make sure that the money stays there for an inheritance. The problem is IRAs are a terrible inheritance tool. They're great for charity, but terrible for passing to the next generation, because they're going to have to take it out over 10 years and they're going to have to pay income tax on it, right? So what might be a little bit better is you start with that 4% withdrawal rate, but then the next year you do 4% in an inflation adjustment, like the regular 4% rule. And while that may be more aggressive, it still has a high likelihood of success if your goal is to spend the money down in the IRA. Now, this is part of a much broader conversation within the retirement planning framework, of which I have several videos talking about how to distribute income and all of that. Of course, I'm not going to say we should spend money from an IRA that we don't want or need just to pay income taxes. That's silly, right? But what this study could be indicative of is people drastically underspend in retirement, especially if they've been given this anchor point of a required minimum distribution. And either they don't understand mechanistically how it works, or they're scared of overspending, so they just default to, again, this anchor point. And what I'm here to say is Yes, even though the starting values of a required minimum distribution and a 4% withdrawal rate may be the same, you'll end up with vastly different spending over your lifetime. David Blanchett at Morningstar has even done studies on this where they reviewed an RMD style spending rate versus guardrails versus inflation adjusted versus no inflation adjustment in down years, and figured out what's the best spending method. And the truth is, there is no best spending method. There's trade-offs between them. The highest withdrawal rate is the required minimum distribution, because if the account value goes down, your real dollars spent goes down with it. Whereas a static 4% is going to say 4% of a million plus an inflation adjustment, please. My point here, again, is not to be prescriptive in that we should be spending more money from our IRAs. It's prescriptive in the sense of that 84% figure is probably a statistic that shows a larger truth of we drastically, chronically underspend during retirement. And this is why having a fully functioning financial plan is so important. If you don't fly business class, the next generation will, right? And I'm not advocating spending money for the sake of spending money, but you have worked too long and too hard to have these dollars accumulate and just sit there for no reason than to otherwise grow to a larger number. And of course, there's nuance to this, and there's the other extreme of you don't want to chronically overspend and be the widow that I've talked to at 75, 77 years old, who we're having to have the discussion of, you don't have enough money. That's not what I'm advocating. What I am advocating is to spend at a reasonable amount, and most people spend far under that. So I hope that's helpful. Until next time, thanks everyone.